Hello and welcome to Bargain Bin. It's a video game podcast. My name is Johnny and my co-host here's name is
Jamie.
And each week we bring you games under $15, usually on Steam, just like we're sifting through a bargain bin at your favorite local game store, trying to pick out some gems for you. They're not always gems, but the last few weeks we've had a pretty good hit rate, and let's see if that continues this week with Heads Adventures Chibichibi. It is a kind of 2.5D platformer. I just say that because there are kind of 3D sprites and stuff, but it's just side scrolling. It's a platformer. It has a single player and co-op mode, and it's kind of in the classic Mario World style where you're going through themed worlds. There are 8 levels per world, and you are using a variety of abilities to tackle environmental puzzles, collect optional collectibles, get through in under an amount of time to try to get the maximum amount of stars that you can for a run. Jamie and me played it co-op this week, and we have a lot of thoughts. We laughed a lot, we smiled a lot, and we even streamed it a little bit, which you can find on Jamie's YouTube channel, Little Red Jam. As far as just some of the Steam stats goes, before we dive into the conversation, the developer is Mana Wanderer, and it is $7.99 currently, which is not a sale price. That's just the base price. The only other thing I would mention before I pass it over to you to fill in any gaps, Jamie, is it is different than kind of a Mario-style platformer, only in that your character has a number of kind of persistent abilities. One involves shooting heads out of your head, and the heads do a number of things. They're kind of like little balls that either attach onto things so you can make little bridges. They're bombs, so they explode and can shoot you across the map while knocking you out. Or they are little springy things. And you can also turn yourself into a head and have all of those same abilities. So you can be a little bomb, you can attach yourself to things, and you can have a little spring that pops out to jump really high and higher than you can when you're on 2 feet. That's Heads Adventures Chibichibi. Jamie, come on in here and tell me what I missed. Tell me what you want to say, and if there's anything you want to kind of preface the conversation with before we dive in.
The only other thing is that I would add it was released on December 28th, so we did indeed play a newer released game this week. I usually like to mention the release date. Otherwise, this game was something, and I think that was a good intro, and we should dive on in.
All right, before we get started, I want to do a little primer on a genre that 2025 spawned, and that genre is friend slop. In the age of AI, in the age of deepfakes and all of these, kind of pseudo-creative things being done by robots, kind of slop has been appended to a lot of things. Internet slop is kind of a broad genre, but friend slop in video games started out as kind of taking cheap asset packs, taking kind of free programs, and just quickly whipping together games that would make people laugh because they're janky, predominantly oriented towards streamers. Since that's kind of the way that influencers show games these days, that's the predominant video game media. An interesting thing happened in 2025 though, and that was that the genre itself, right after it was coined, was kind of taken back by developers, and we saw some really beautiful games. The kind of leader of the friend slop genre as far as a beautification of it is the game Peak, which is showing up on a lot of best of 2025 lists and is a super fun game you can play with friends. It's been a huge deal if you know anything about games, where you climb up a mountain, you're little Boy Scouts, and it's basically just a co-op climbing game that streams really well, and that's friend slop.
Is Peak meant to be co-op? I feel like I've never heard that. Not that I know much about it.
Oh yeah, Peak is a predominantly co-op game. In fact,
interesting.
Doing it alone is way harder, and I would argue a lot less fun.
Huh. That certainly differs from this game, where I think doing it together seemed like it was harder in all regards than if you were just doing it on your own.
For sure, and we're going to dive into our co-op experience. I just wanted to give that primer because I think that games like Head Adventures Chibichibi, which are, in my humble opinion, absolute trash, are cropping up more and more because there is this idea of like, well, we can just make something sloppy, people will still stream it and geek, which is exactly what we did, and like laugh really hard and enjoy themselves. We can just kind of throw a bunch of stuff together that doesn't really work, inelegant level design, stuff like that. And I think it's a fascinating trend in games. I wonder if it will continue in 2026. I think it likely will, but the permutations that it'll take are fascinating, and the way it intersects with AI is fascinating. I know you mentioned something about that in relation to this game, so I would love to dig into that a little bit when we get the chance. But I just wanted to give that primer before we dive in. So Jamie, what's kind of the game loop of Head Adventure Chibi? What did you like about it? And what were some of the drawbacks?
Oh, where to start? Game loop. I mean, I guess we'll talk. A game loop is traditionally just all mechanics, but there was no story to this game. I don't know if there was supposed to be an intro. The Steam description mentioned something about being a little witch that was dragged into some cyberspace by a devil. Maybe our system just glitched out and we like missed that cutscene, but basically we just jumped right into these platformer levels where you're traversing through some 2D map and trying to find the exit. And there are things that can kill you, whether it's falling on some spikes, getting hit by something, a plethora of circumstances that can result in your gory death. And you can get revived if you die, but both you and your co-op partner have to make it to the exit in one piece. There are no checkpoints within a map or within a level before you can progress on to the next level. And of course, there's different awards you can get for each level, just completing it, getting all of the, I think they're called healing balloons, which are what revive your partner, but there's a set number of them in each level. And if you find them all, that's an award. Or if you complete the level in some set amount of time defined for that level.
Yeah, I think another interesting thing to just tease out as we continue to talk about gameplay is Jamie said you can die in gory ways. That's very true. Like when you die, sometimes your character actually has blood like streaming out of their mouth, and you can like die and get impaled on spikes and all sorts of things. But the characters themselves, it's worth mentioning, are like these two little folks wearing like dinosaur costumes and have like slightly like pigeon-toed stances, and they're very like, I mean, that's the chibi part. It's very like cutesy, but then there's blood. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely a mix of anime cute and anime gory and weird.
Yeah, which is honestly like kind of a core Japanese ideal, I feel like, where it's like you'll see animes where it's like drawn in this cutesy style, and then they're like stabbing each other to the death and like bleeding out and all these things. So I'm pretty sure this game wasn't made by a Japanese developer. I'm not exactly sure, but it's definitely like modeled on kind of those Japanese anime oriented ideals. So yeah, I mean, as far as the worlds go, we didn't finish the game. I shouldn't say we. I rage quit after a deeper level in the third world, after we had been trying it for like a half hour, which is not uncommon in these levels. But the first world is kind of a grassy meadow area with stones. The second world is kind of like what Jamie said, this like cyberpunk, almost like skyscraper city. And then the third world is a continuation of that, but with kind of some interesting, you're more at like a street level, like you're seeing convenience stores and things like that. So it's a weird mix. There's not much of a theme to it, I don't think. There are police cars in it for whatever reason. There are big like PlayStation symbols like the X, circle, square, triangle at different places for whatever reason. There's big blocks of ice. The environments are kind of all over the place. I would love to hear your thoughts on kind of, Jamie, the feel of the game. Like how did jumping feel? How did running feel? That's an important part of a platformer in my opinion.
The movement honestly feels pretty bad. I feel like, I mean, one of the first things that Johnny and I noticed is that the jumping mechanics were really unintuitive compared to other games. When you jump, you don't really... Well, initially, you move a lot farther than I think you might anticipate, at least for Johnny and I. So a lot of the jumping on and between platforms is pretty tricky. Now, granted, like Johnny kind of mentioned, like the thing with some of these slop games is that they are bad, but then when you're playing them with a friend, you can have a really good time because stupid stuff happens and you just laugh at each other for it. So I feel like in regards to the mechanics and all the things that make this game slop is also what made Johnny and I laugh some of the hardest. So the mechanics are tough and it's hard to move between things and it's pretty glitchy in that regard when you're rolling around as a head, which I think Johnny mentioned a bit earlier, that you can roll around, switch into head form and just roll around as a bodiless head. A lot of that movement feels hard to control and unintuitive, but that does lead to silly deaths and weird things happening, which you can get a kick out of. But from a pure gameplay standpoint, yeah, the mechanics are pretty bad. I think there's an aspect to where it would be easier to complete some of the levels if you were playing it on your own, but I don't know if you'd ever play it on your own because the things that are bad about the game are only really enjoyable when you're playing with a friend and can just laugh it off.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I think another thing that just comes to mind about the jumping is like it feels very floaty, which is usually not a good sign as far as like you press the button to jump and then you're up in the air for kind of a really long time with little control. And then also some of the platforms that you're supposed to jump onto, especially in the later levels, are like so tiny that it is like you have to jump, go past them, and then like kind of float back in the air to try to balance on them, constantly like overshooting and overcorrecting. Which is, yeah, kind of damning for what I would prefer to be like tight platform mechanics. But as you said, it does lead to these funny moments where you'll try to like skip parts of the map by just like blowing yourself up and throwing yourself to the other end.
Yeah, and you can kick each other. So we also found some hard parts where we just tried to kick one of us across and then the other one tried to make it through, which also kind of speaks to a point I wanted to bring up about the levels are pretty difficult, I would say, for just even a solo player. And so playing co-op was even more difficult because one person might make it, but then it's so much harder for two people to simultaneously make it to the end, which for it to publicize itself as a co-op game, I thought was a big miss among many of the misses of this game, for it to be so difficult in co-op mode because it seemed more geared to be a single player game in its difficulty, or at least in how glitchy it was.
Yeah, so with the like revive balloons, they are the collectibles that give you a star if you get all of them at the end of a level. And you, another thing to mention is you do need a certain amount of stars to progress to the next world. So like in the first world, we had to go back and redo levels because we didn't have enough like prestige points or whatever to unlock World 2. So that is something to keep in mind. It's kind of unnecessary gating in my opinion. But then when you pick up one of those balloons, you revive the other player wherever they are on the map, if they are in a place where it's like possible to revive them, right? So like if they died in like a canyon without spikes, they'll like re-revive in the canyon if they're able to get out of it. But if they like fell off the map or something of that nature, they revive at the start. And there's usually only about 6 revive balloons in the level. So once you've collected them all, anytime you die, both characters have to go back to the start and try to make it to the end without dying. You can also, I guess there's a mechanic where we called it the umbilical cord, which you can like pick up your dead comrade and then go to a balloon and revive them right behind you. But that adds in a whole other layer of like challenging physics things and weirdness because the other player's body is like streaming behind you and can get caught in traps and stuff like that. So
yeah, we call it an umbilical cord because it literally, you press like the Y button and then it's this light cord thing that attaches between you and your partner, and then, or your dead comrade. And then, yeah, you just walk and the dead body of your comrade drags behind you, flopping around, bouncing all over the place. And it straight up just looks like an umbilical cord.
Yeah, like a glowing neon orange umbilical cord. I mean, maybe that's how umbilical cords look. I've never really seen one in real life.
I feel like an umbilical cord would be less gross looking.
That gives you an indication of the kind of game we're talking about here, folks. Jamie, anything else? I mean, the sound design is kind of like non-existent. There's just like one song that loops over and over and kind of becomes very grating on your ears, or on my ears, I should say. It's kind of this cheery tune, almost like an ice cream truck, I would imagine. And the characters themselves, when they are exploding, they say, "Goro, goro, goro." And otherwise, they just kind of make like kind of sounds when they jump and stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, it feels like there's still just so much of how bad this all was that we haven't even touched on yet. Some of the levels that are supposed to take maybe 2 minutes were taking us upwards of 15 to 30 minutes. So that probably, again, really speaks to, honestly, how difficult a lot of the levels were. And granted, we weren't trying our hardest to get through it. We were looking to just have some good laughs and have a good time. But even then, that's a pretty big time difference.
Yeah, it's like some levels would say like 1 minute or 1:30 or 2 minutes, and they would take us like straight up a half hour.
Yeah.
Which is pretty wild.
You know, some of my other qualms with the game are just the powers you have. Like when you're in body form, you can shoot the heads out of yourself, and there are the 3 different powers the heads have, but when you shoot them out of yourself, it's kind of randomized, so you just spam shooting heads out of your body, and then random stuff will happen, whether that's them exploding, them sticking to things, or I don't know, something. And then when you are the head, you can switch between the powers on your own, but the head uses besides the spring feel pretty pointless. We never found any use cases for them. So there's just a lot of weird, silly stuff that feels utterly pointless. And again, there was no story introduction or anything. Yeah, I mean, I keep saying it. This was bad.
Left speechless by the badness. I feel like there's not really more that I want to say about it. What about you?
I think I just want to vent a little bit on just you know.
Let's go for it.
They could have. I want to say they could have actually just put some effort into making this a good game, but it doesn't even feel like that was their intention at all. Like they didn't even want this to be a good game. I feel like they purposefully wanted it to be a bad game and to just try to sell off of that. So there's no intention between even making like the weird, silly parts actually good in their weird and silliness. And it's like a cute concept. The characters are cute. The levels look cool. There is a lot of variety in them, and it's funny the ways in which you can die. But just all of the aspects that would matter out of making this a good game were so intentionally left uncared for or devalued. And that just is disappointing.
It's kind of indicative of, I think, the era we live in as far as like meme culture and stuff like that too, because like it has overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam.
99% out of 333 reviews. Granted, none of those are English reviews, so maybe it's a difference in culture on what people are looking for out of their games, but yeah.
Yeah, and then the only other thing I wanted to talk about in relation to kind of that slop genre is you mentioned that they used some AI to make this game, and I was wondering just to what extent that was the case, because I didn't want to like misquote you or anything like that.
Yeah, I had just read on the Steam page there's usually an AI disclosure thing, and I think it mentioned that for some of the backgrounds or textures or posters they used AI to make some of the art, and then that the soundtrack was AI enhanced to make it a more enjoyable experience. I think those were similar to the words they used. So I don't know. It's hard to say what else. Maybe something in the title screen or just the title screen was also generated by AI. So there is some touch and some influence there, but
it was sloppy as hell.
Yeah.
That AI did not do a good job making the soundtrack sound better, I'll tell you that much.
No.
All right, let's move on to endorsements and hopefully end on a positive note with some binnable moments, and we can get our energy up. Let's do this, Jamie. As far as endorsing it for me, I really think that if you're looking for some friend slop and you want to play couch co-op, you could do worse. Like, we played this in front of our housemate Bert last night, and they were like laughing just like us at some like weird shit, but that's like 5 minutes enjoyable, and then after that it's just kind of frustrating and sad in my opinion. So while you could probably do worse, you can't really do that much worse. And for all of the reasons we've mentioned, for kind of my view of games as art and games like this undermining that exact ideal, I have to not endorse it. Jamie, what about you?
Yeah, I feel like that's a nice way to put it, of just viewing. I think we both view games as an art form, and this definitely felt very counter to that. And I think that's why it ground my gears so much, and why, honestly, kind of ultimately right now, I feel disappointed in the fact that we spent the time playing that game.
Well, it's important as far as like a reflection on games and where games are at in 2026 as well, because there is a whole, there is a whole community of Steam users, of like gamers who enjoy the slop genre and enjoy these kinds of experiences. So I definitely don't want to yuck anyone's yum, but I don't regret the time we spent with it. We did spend a decent amount of time with it, folks. We weren't just like we weren't just going for, looking at a few levels and being like, this is shit. Like, we played it for hours and hours. But
yeah, we maybe put 3 to 4 hours into it.
Yeah,
I would say.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, did you say not endorse yet, or is that just kind of implied?
No, I hadn't said it yet. If you need the concrete statement, I do not endorse this game.
Yeah, raspberries all around. All right, folks. Well, Jamie, I'm gonna go ahead with some binnable moments here. Give you a little time to think about yours. I have been playing a couple of games that I want to bring to the show, bring a little bit of awareness here. If you're looking for some games at the beginning of the year that actually are good, Asbury Pines is one. It's kind of like what I perceived at first to be like a Twin Peaks style story, but set against the backdrop of an idle game, which is really interesting. So your characters can scavenge, they can work, they can live life, and each has like a short timer that you progress through, and you need all these resources to do different things. I don't want to get too deep into it, but basically it's an idle game that tells a really cool story, and it actually ends up being more of an apocalypse game. I won't give any more spoilers than that, but it reminds me more of Stephen King's The Stand than it does Twin Peaks now, which I feel like was a pretty interesting progression of the story. So I actually joined the developers Discord and reached out to them to potentially learn more about the game and maybe do an interview at some point, which would be great. But that's something I've been looking forward to playing each day. Another game I've been playing on my hacked 3DS is SteamWorld Heist, which is basically a tactical 2D extraction kind of style shooter where you play as cowbots. They're like cowboy robots. They're steam powered, so they need water to survive, and they are under attack from some evil scrappers that are trying to build evil cowbots. So it's the cowbots versus the scrappers, and I just think the story is great. There's like a little ship that you go back to and socialize with your friends at. The missions are challenging. I'm playing it on like experience mode, but not too challenging, and it's really kind of restoring my faith in games, which is always wonderful when a game does that, especially one from 2016. I love it. What about you, Jamie?
My binnable moments would be probably that I watched a new anime called Seventh Time Loop that I really enjoyed. It was just kind of cute and wholesome and heartwarming, and like everything works out in the world. There's not really any conflict, which just felt nice to watch in that moment. I did try playing another one of the newly released games that we were looking at from this past week called The Path Home. It's a cute little puzzle game. And yeah, I thought it was cute and fun. Probably nothing to write home about, but if you like puzzlers and want something just simple and cozy and relaxing, I thought it was a nice play. I didn't finish it, but I got a few levels in, so that was a fun thing to do.
I would also be remiss if I didn't mention that we watched a really interesting movie called The Ugly Stepdaughter. I believe it's like a Norwegian film. It won some awards. It was just made in 2025 by a female director. It was her first film, and it is like body horror focusing on the ugly, like the evil stepdaughter in Cinderella. So kind of from that perspective, and it's what the stepmom and society tries to put on the stepdaughter to try to make her as desirable to the prince as Cinderella. And I just thought that was a fascinating film that actually made me feel like empathy for beauty standards. I feel like I've always had like sympathy toward the cause of like abolishing beauty standards and an understanding that they're bad, etc. But this is like a really visceral retelling that doesn't miss a chance to kind of drive that message home. So I really liked that.
Yeah, it was very gory, very gross, and very good. The 3 G's. But my other binnable moment that I remembered was that I finished an audio book that I really enjoyed called The Black Prism. It's kind of fantasy realm, but not fantasy romance, which I'd been really getting suckered into a lot of fantasy romance books by not reading the description far enough to see that they were mostly romance books, and this one is just fantasy, which I wanted and really enjoyed, and it was really good. And now I'm starting the second book in the series of that, and it's been really enjoyable to listen to.
Well, good, Jamie. I'm glad. I think that's all we have this week. Do you want to sign us off?
Bargain bin out. Love y'all.
Peace.
Soil Day Radio.
For a community of weirdos built on words. Find out more at soildayradio.com.